Welcome, everybody, to the Homeschool Show from North Carolinians for Home Education. I am your host, Amanda Wayers, and today I have a super special guest. It is my husband, Michael Wayers.
Hey!
So I'm so excited to get Michael on camera. I am definitely the extrovert part of this team. So usually he's behind the scenes and I'm out front, but today I've got him in here with me. I'm so excited. So welcome.
Welcome.
And I wanted to talk to you because we, in our 20 years of homeschooling, we have been on quite a journey.
Yes, we have.
And I wanted you to talk a little bit about when we first started, or even before we first started, when I first came to you and said, so what do you think about homeschooling? How did that go? What went through your mind? What did you think about homeschooling back in those days?
Back in those days, I had very little experience to homeschooling, and what experience I did have was basically in the unschooling world with basically people who did nothing with their kids and basically assumed that them running around and entertaining themselves was all that was needed. I didn't really agree with that method of education, and I felt that there was a lot better ways to do things, and I got a lot out of school, and I thought, wow, it just felt like you were just ignoring your kids. And I really didn't want that to be what my kids experienced.
Okay. And I know that you told me, so initially your reaction when I said, hey, what do you think about homeschooling was very negative.
Yes.
It was kind of like, why in the world?
Why would we do that?
Right.
I mean, what possible accomplishment would there be?
Yeah. And later on, I think you told me that you had a picture in your head. So several years later, our daughter was struggling in school, and I came back to you and we talked about, well, what if we homeschool for a year and work on some things with her and see what's going to happen? And the idea at that time was that we would put her back in school. But you told me that you had this idea, this picture in your head of what homeschooling was going to look like, right? And you did not see how that was possible in our home. So remember what you said about that? Would you share that?
I really think that I thought homeschooling needed to be school. And I don't know how we were going to do school with a little kid running around and my daughter trying to focus, who was somewhat ADD attention, and my wife, who was overwhelmed with all the kids running around and trying to do all this stuff. And I worked a lot, so I wasn't going to be there all the time or a lot of the time. And I just saw, I didn't know how you could run 8 hours of school a day or 6 hours of school a day. And it just made no sense to me from what I had the experience of school as.
So I remember you saying that you had a picture in your head of like desks and a chalkboard and a flag.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing. So
when you wanted to get to school, I was like going out looking for desks. And I'm thinking, and that's what I asked you. It's like, well, how many desks do you need? And you were like, what? I don't need a desk. And I'm like, how are you going to do school without desks?
Exactly. So we have both that in the very beginning, you had sort of a negative perception of what homeschooling was, what some people were calling homeschooling that maybe was not actually homeschooling. And then you also had sort of a unrealistic picture in your head of what homeschooling needed to look like. Is that
yes,
fair?
I felt that you needed to duplicate what school did, which I thought, well, we have fewer kids, but she'll still have to spend 6 hours a day teaching them. And I had no realistic expectation. I guess I didn't really think about it because I had a little bit of an experience where I did quite a bit of school in a very short period of time. And I guess when I really thought about that, I thought, wow, if I was just given the opportunity to do as much work as I wanted to, instead of having to sit there and wait for everybody else and the teacher to go around and talk to everybody else, that I probably could get stuff done quicker. So,
yeah. So we ended up starting homeschooling. And the idea when we very first started was we would only do this for a year and then see what happened.
but I definitely wanted a plan. I wanted an organized structure, or at least some level of structure, that we were going to do something. We had a plan for math, we had a plan for English, we had a plan for history, we had a plan for the sciences, and it wasn't just going to be ignored. And obviously, she talked about field trips and how they can learn off of that. And so I was open to those options with learning, because I certainly remember going on field trips as a kid and learned a lot from them. So it wasn't that. And I still had this weird idea of, well, how are the kids going to ever meet any other kids if they're sitting here all the time? So that was another big concern.
Yeah, of course. And I think that is super common among new homeschooling parents or people considering homeschooling. I think a lot of times, a lot of maybe dads in particular, this is a gross generalization, but I think a lot of dads tend to be more analytical and maybe they feel like, okay, I want to see a plan. I want to know the facts and figures. I want to know, what are you going to be doing? And so I did make a plan. I had a pretty detailed plan. I had curriculum picked out. I, knew what we were doing. We had joined a homeschool group that did field trips and social get-togethers. So we had the social piece figured out, and we jumped in. And there were definitely bumps in the road. But by the end of that year, I think I felt like that you had changed your mind a little bit about homeschooling in general. Would you say that's fair?
Yes, I guess I got the picture that the kids could get a lot done in a short period of time. And it didn't ever occur to me that you could teach like two different kids at the same age at the same time. There was curriculum, and you could be reading something to one child and it benefits both, but on a different level. And that never occurred to me because that was not something I ever experienced in school. It was generally, maybe in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, you might be in the same class, but it was generally not. And so I guess all that information and watching the kids learn in different fashions, as we went on in that, my daughter learned one way, our son learned another way, and to understand that you could cater to their learning style, and you didn't have to adapt yourself to the learning style of the teacher, meant you could learn much quicker. Yeah. And I was very surprised on that. It didn't ever dawn on me that worked like that you could have the time to donate and to focus on what works best for that child. Yeah. Even though you have multiple children.
And then at the end of that school year, the year before we ever started, I had gone to the homeschool conference to Thrive. It wasn't called Thrive yet, but I went to Thrive and went to the workshops, went in the vendor hall, whatever. But that next year, after we had homeschooled one whole school year, you came with me. Yep. And how did that experience affect your perceptions of homeschooling or the homeschool community? What did you think whenever you came to the homeschool conference with me that first time?
I think that helped a lot. I think listening to other parents who have homeschooled for 10 years, listening to ideas and getting a broader spectrum view of what was going on, what it could look like, how you could cater. I mean, I had no idea there were so many curriculums. I mean, for me, you went to school, they gave you a book, that's what you did. Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't an option. And I mean, I knew in school there were classes that I hated because of the curriculum that we had And I didn't understand it well in the method that it was taught. And so I struggled with certain classes, and other classes I did really well. And I often wondered why that was. But then when I saw our kids learning from things that more fit their learning style, it was amazing to me that my son could understand. And I mean, my wife often read to him, and he would often walk around in circles, and I would watch that and go, he can't be learning anything. But then he could tell you everything about everything she said and everything that went on and the whole story, and he could break it all down. And I'm sitting there like, wow, I don't really learn like that, but he does. And that's amazing,
Yeah. Super neat. So, I know that after that homeschool conference experience for both of us being there together, it made a really big difference. And I feel like from then on, we were way more on the same page with homeschooling and kind of tackling it together instead of it just being me and this is what I'm doing. It was what we're doing as a family. And I feel like that really changed our homeschool experience as well. And here we are this many years later and have never given it up yet.
Yep. It was definitely a great experience. Yeah. I don't think our kids could have done better in school. So
yeah, absolutely. The last thing I really wanted you to share was if you had any advice for other dads. Maybe there's some other dads or moms out there that are listening to this or watching it that are feeling like you were feeling way back in the beginning. Maybe they have had a negative perception of homeschooling, or maybe they just know nothing about it at all. What would be your advice for those dads or parents?
I think the greatest things is that it doesn't have to be perfect. And the person teaching doesn't need to be a perfect teacher. There's a lot of curriculum out there that aids you in doing the teaching, and to a lot of degree, I mean, how you provide that information, the kids often thrive if it's working for them and it's something that they can get into. And if it's not, then you can change. And you can't do that in school. You can't just go to your teacher and say, I want to change. But you can at home. And when it's not working, that change can be dramatic. And suddenly things start clicking along, and you just don't really know the learning style that your child's going to enjoy until you see it. And then when they see it, then it's like, oh, well, we know we need to do this. And then it gets really easier because they are happy then. And so if you picture in school, while you have a certified teacher and she certainly knows that she's certified, does she really know how your child learns? And do they have time to spend that time with your child? And will they spend much time with your child? I mean, you're essentially, kid is doing his own work in school. If they're lecturing to them, which obviously you'd have to be a lot older, but if the hands-on and the ability to change information and get different curriculum to fit how the child learns is such a positive that I just saw stuff that I saw the kids moving forward super fast and enjoying what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think you have to give that a lot of thought. And if you can think through that, and I'm a planner, in my head I plan, but I'm not just for do whatever. So you have to share that. I need you to have a plan. I need that for me so that I will understand what you're doing and how it's going and how I can help, because I can't just help if I have no idea what you're doing. And obviously I can't be there if I'm at work all day, but when I come home, I could do this or I could do that. And so wanting to be part of it and seeing that there's an outside the box of regular school, and it does work. I mean, there are a lot of homeschooled kids, and you go see 10,000, 20,000 homeschool kids, and they're all doing well. Well, not obviously, you don't know. Every kid doesn't do perfectly, but
sure,
the greater majority of the kids are doing well. And as you see that, you're thinking, wow, I didn't see that many kids in my class doing well. I always had the kids who were doing really terrible or bored out of their minds or ignoring everybody or cutting up and throwing things. And, so the classroom learning is far from perfect. So you have to remember that when you're sitting there thinking that homeschooling, oh, this is never going to work. Only, you have to be a certified teacher. And I remember sat with those certified teachers my whole life, and that there were many kids in my class that were utter failures, and there was nobody to spend that time with them to help them find a way that they could learn.
Sure. I think that's fabulous advice. From the wife's perspective, I would say if your spouse needs to see a plan, an organized plan of what you're going to do in this homeschooling thing, then do that. Do that. It will not kill you. You can do it. It'll be great. And sometimes, I am not a very structured person. And I found that, especially when we were first getting started, having an organized plan, having a curriculum that actually gave me a little bit of that external structure really did help. It helped as we were getting started. It helped on those hard days to have that structure. So that would be my advice. So thank you for all of that. Now, it is time for Homeschool Helps with Amanda. And today I'm talking about, when does homeschooling begin? So I have already mentioned a couple times in this episode that we have homeschooled for 20 years. And that just traces back to the year that I filed my notice of intent to homeschool and opened Covenant Classical Academy. That was in 2005. But in reality, when does homeschooling actually begin? And the reality is, I think homeschooling begins at birth. It begins as soon as that baby is born. We have a new grandbaby who's about 2 months old now. And I have already seen our daughter working with our 2-month-old grandson and, doing things with him, stimulating his little mind and reading to him, all of those things, that brain development. I heard a statistic today that said that most of our learning and brain development happens in that first year of life. So really, in that sense, every parent is a homeschooling parent. And a lot of times the leap from just parent to homeschooling parent, in our minds, it's this huge leap, but in reality, it's really not. It's really not that big of a jump, because you're already doing it. You're already homeschooling. I know you, from the time our kids were tiny, you were teaching them things. You had, our kids out when you were building stuff or working in the yard or, whatever. And all of that is homeschooling. You're teaching as you're going along. So all of that to encourage you that if you have preschoolers, if you have a baby, if you're thinking, oh, I have to wait to start homeschooling, the reality is you already are. You already are. So make the most of every opportunity. All right. Last but not least, I always like to share what is going on in the world of NCHE. So with NCHE, we have a couple of field trips coming up. We always like to highlight our field trips. The first one is we're going back to the Charlotte Hornets. I am so excited about this. We've gone to this a couple times as a family.
It was fun.
It's super fun. This year it's coming up on January the 20th. That is Martin Luther King Day. So a lot of our activities are canceled that day. So it'll be a little easier for us to go to attend this time. So look for that. The link will be in the show notes. Also, always you could go to nche.com and look for the field trip button on the homepage. Also, we are going back to the Nutcracker. I think there are still a few tickets left. Those tickets go so fast, and there is almost always a waiting list. So if you want tickets to the Nutcracker, make sure you get them because they are going fast. So next, Graduate Central. So we have talked a lot on here. I know we personally have graduated 3 of our kids through NCHE. We've done the NCHE graduation, and it was lovely. It really is a wonderful ceremony.
Amazing job. They do a great job.
Yes. So you can go again right on the homepage, go to nche.com. There is a button that says Graduate Central. And once you click on that button, it will tell you everything you need to know about graduation, getting the cap and gown and the diploma and all the things. So make sure you check that out. It's all been updated for this year. So we're looking forward to that. Graduation will be on May 24th, 2025. Crazy. Last but not least, all of the Thrive Conference website has been updated for 2025. So the featured speakers have been announced. I'm so excited about our lineup for 2025. And coming up on this show, we will be highlighting those featured speakers. I have some great interviews with them, and it's just going to be a good time coming up. So make sure you check that out. Also, some of the other pages, the vendor application has been up, but it's on there. All the things, all the information that you need to know. Again, go to the homepage and there's a button that says Thrive, and you click on that button, or you'll find it in the show notes. So I think that's about all I've got for you today. Thanks for joining me.
You're so welcome.
I appreciate it. All right. And as always, we hope that you will go forward and homeschool with confidence and joy. So have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.